Okay, welcome back. The Monday afternoon quarterbacks are here to size up the strategic plays and misplays going on in the game we call federal politics. Michelle Austin is Masuma Strategies. Marianne Carter with Environics Research, and from the Earnscliffe Strategy Group, Robin Sears and Greg Weston are here. Welcome to you all. Michelle, I was struck by watching Trudeau today. He was talking to a round table about women's rights.
Right.
And yet the whole headline say, well, he's not going to bring up human rights with the Philippine president. And I wonder how he cannot bring it up. What's your advice to him?
It's important to be consistent, and this has been a problem with him in certain areas of the world. He also had trouble doing this in the Middle East as well with the Saudis. So if you're going to be a champion of values and virtues, then you have to be consistently a champion of these things. And when you get this massive rock star reception at your hotel, you need to use it to talk about human rights. And I think that women, men, children, all people around the world would be very, very happy to receive that message consistently from Justin Trudeau.
He's under a lot of pressure. Marianne, you agree?
I think, well, firstly, we looked at Prime Minister Harper, who actually spoke out quite actively on this when it came to China a few years back. But I think this is actually part of a long-term strategy to get a potential non-permanent seat on the Security Council of the United Nations. So you need 2/3 of countries' votes, which I believe is around 193 countries. And while it would be admirable of Prime Minister Trudeau to speak out about this, I think a longer-term strategy in terms of having an active voice on the Security Council in 2020 is probably the approach behind this.
So inconsistency be damned, go ahead and stay quiet, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it gets put on the table where international politics is a little bit more complex. It's not so black and white, even though it might be the right thing to do in the short term. How much is it actually going to pay off? I don't think the president of the Philippines is going to take his comments very seriously regardless.
Mr. Sears, which does he do? Stay quiet, take a principled stand, lose a security seat? After all, the summit host apparently got him the seat at this observer table for a prestigious security conference. So,
you know, my old boss, Willy Brandt, used to say, if you would like to improve your personal popularity by shouting about human rights, by all means do so. If you would like to help the people you are claiming to protest on behalf of, you do it quietly. I mean, I think that you have to be a little bit careful about what's said outside the room and inside the room. Certainly, in the meeting with Aung San Suu Kyi last week, Mr. Ray described it simply as very tough. And I doubt whether he got through a whole session with Duterte without saying some expression of concern. So you have to be a little bit cautious about the game that's played about how loud was he in public versus how effective was he in private.
well, at least raise it, Greg. It sounds like it's, if I get the opportunity, I'll raise it. I mean, I'm not sure he's going to get the opportunity, but if he does, doesn't he have to go forward, say something?
Well, I guess you can. You have to remember who he's talking to here. He's talking to a president of the Philippines who was got elected on a promise to fatten the fish in the harbor with the bodies of drug dealers. I mean, this is a guy that you can go in and say, really, I'd like to raise human rights issues with you.
Ignore those stains on the rug, right? Yeah.
I kind of go with Robin. At some point, it's, do you want to make a speech about it, or do you actually want to achieve something? And Canada's position, going back to Tiananmen and before that, has been engagement. Stay engaged, and if you build trade with nations, then that's what gives you influence. Going into somebody's country and saying, we really don't like how you're running it. Duterte has already said, any leader who comes and tells me that they don't like how I'm running it, I'm going to say too bad and kick them out. So we already know the outcome of what that conversation would be. So I think there are conversations taking place behind the scenes that may be more useful than making
Marianne
speech.
says, I mean, Harper used to bring it up with the Chinese leaders before. And
that was really effective. Yeah.
The death penalty use went up.
Talked about using it to raise your stakes at home domestically. He did that frequently on foreign policy issues.
Okay.
Just hang on, just a second.
You're nonpartisan,
here.
remember?
Oh, I know I'm not partisan. I'm not going to defend Harper. But what you're saying to me and to my 3 daughters is it's okay not to defend human rights in certain circumstances. Politics is more important. Each one of you said that. I'm shocked. This is somebody who is running on a values platform from top to bottom. It is not okay, if you want to bring out change, not to bring these things up. I have to say that. I'm shocked.
The difference between talking about it and doing things about it.
Well, I'd take either at this point.
Okay, well, you don't know what happened behind the scenes, so don't make claims you can't defend.
Oh, well, they should, at least you'd think they'd say something. But anyway, let's move along because we're clearly not going anywhere with this one. But I do want to point out that Nick Nanos has done a poll that shows 4 out of 10 Canadians think Liberal policies are beneficial to the upper class, not the middle class. And I wonder how you fight that perception, if indeed it's a perception. Maybe it's a reality. But I'm just curious. You look at those figures, and you got a problem with perception, if nothing else. Robin, what do you do to overcome that? Is there a way?
Well, I mean, here I think I will unusually agree with Michelle. A little less glitz and glamour on the road would be a good start. I mean, this whole showboat kind of style plays into those sort of numbers and doesn't really do you much good at this point. I think, secondly, they've got to put some proof points that people will see as credible out there. The Morneau tax package was not it. Mm-hmm. The next chance will be the budget. And if in the budget there isn't proof that the average Canadian is actually being taken care of better than they were and better than by the previous government, then you got a real problem. You
agree, Marianne, or has they got to do more?
No, I agree. And I think to build off that is you have to look at the approach, right? So if you look at something like the Canada Child Care Benefit, in some circles they say it's lifting 300,000 children out of poverty in Canada. Mm-hmm. But then a recent Fraser Institute study, I believe, says it's in the same breath helping those people to pay $850 more on their personal income taxes. So is this about giving more money and putting it in your pocket and making those determinations? Or is this about having middle-class Canadians rely on transaction programs from the government? And so I think the glitz and glam, to speak to Robin's point, is something that needs to be sort of toned down a little bit, and they need to get back to the drawing board about connecting with average Canadians.
All right, so how do you fight the perception it helps people like you, Michelle Austin, and not the middle class?
Wow, shots fired. I think that the Liberals have to pick what they are going to go for. If they're going to do an economic platform, they have to focus on it and repeat and repeat and repeat and go back to basics. If they're going to do more of a values platform, which is what they won on in 2015, then they have to swing the other way. I think they're trying to be too cute and they're playing both, and it's not working particularly well for either.
Greg?
My view of those kinds of numbers is pretty simple. Most people believe that governments aren't doing enough for them, so they must be doing more for somebody else. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure if you broke down those things, you could pretty well see the groups of people who say, well, it's not me, so it must be them. And it's very rarely that the middle class will say, well, they're doing too much for poor Canadians. So everybody who doesn't see a benefit themselves usually loads it on and says, well, it must be the upper class.
It's the trend line. I mean, if that was at 50 6 months ago.
The problem that the Liberal government has is that their single messaging focus on helping the middle class, if the middle class is not recognizing that, then they have a real problem.
I want to bring in two of you guys who have DNA related to this next story. You, Mr. Weston, is a former journalist, and you, who has Toronto Star DNA in your family tree. Bill Morneau, as we all know, the finance minister, is under a lot of trouble. So the Toronto Star did I can't even describe it. It was a long puff piece, to be kind, talking about Bill Morneau, comparing him to Bruce Wayne. That would be Batman. Talking about how he cries during the Parent Trap movie, how he went to church and got chats and defended the working class and giving back to the community and standing up for workers. Anyway, you get the idea. Thousands of words dedicated to how wonderful Bill Morneau is. And I guess, Greg, I'm curious, did these work as damage control, or do people see through them to some other purpose? I don't know whether it was the paper or the report that was just soft or whatever. It was pretty much a puff piece.
Yes. Yes, it was.
Yes, they work, and yes, it's a puff piece.
It was a puff piece. And it just seems so oddly out of place, even for a piece of journalism, to be running that now, talking about Bill Morneau's childhood or something. He's been finance minister for 2 years. I mean, when he first came into public life, you might have run those.
Piece, yeah.
Yeah, but to run it now, this is a straight communications effort. And it may be successful in garnering him some sympathy about, gee, well, he's really actually a really, a nice family guy and the rest of it. I see it another way. It's kind of a so what piece. I think most people think that Bill Morneau is kind of an okay guy and a nice guy, and I don't think they think he's a crook, and I don't think they think that he's came into politics to make money out of it. It's his judgment. It's his judgment on a series of issues affecting him personally, and his taxation measures and how they were handled. Those are the things in question. And the fact that he's a nice guy doesn't mean he's going to finish first in this one.
I was thinking of Val Sears, your dad. What he would have thought seeing that article, Robin.
Well, I think what he would have done right off the top is to say, so when are you going to apologize? I mean, this story was missing its top. If it had had a moment of contrition, a moment of reflection, a moment of genuine regret about what he had done, then a lot of the puff that flowed subsequently would have been more digestible. But in its absence, the fact that there wasn't an apology was that much more galling.
Now, I know you read this and your heart melted and you said,
I couldn't read
I'm a liberal.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't get past his daughter being put in there. I felt so bad. Listen, I think that Bill Morneau was given a communication strategy that was not built for him. I think Mr. Morneau would tell you himself he's not a great communicator. He's much better at operations. And I think that this communication strategy came too late for him. But I wouldn't blame him for a second. I think this was put in front of him, and he did the best that he could with it. But I just don't think it was a great strategy.
All right, Marianne, last word to you.
Look, this is about damage control and trying to demonstrate, putting a human face or give a raw look into Bill Morneau. But I think this actually comes, or potentially I'm just speculating, former journalist Ben Chin is now working for the Minister of Finance as of October 2017. So maybe this was a targeted public relations and communications strategy since he's joined the team. I've also heard that the minister is also making much more of an effort with members of Parliament and specifically committee chairs, perhaps the Finance Committee, to connect with them a bit more regularly. But I think the lesson in all of this is it's important to make your relationships and alliances when you first become a minister and not have to, do it after the damage has been done.
You agree, obviously, Robin, yeah? All right, that was good. I didn't mean to pick on your upper
Can we go back to the Philippines?
I think that was even too puffy for the Star to run, because I think it's been sitting there. There's a reference in there to an interview in October.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, it's been sitting there for how long?
Ooh, I hadn't thought about it. Good pick up there, Greg West.
I want to know which Parent Trap he's been
Apparently it was a Lindsay Lohan one.
Yeah, is it Lindsay Lohan?
I've seen them all, man. I got 3 girls.
Did you cry through them all, too?
The Parent Trap? It's very cute.
Okay.
Even I would give him that. I wouldn't cry at the Parent Trap.
All right.
I backed on human rights. Let's talk about
Old
that.
Yeller, maybe, but Parent Trap, I didn't. All right. Thank you all. We'll see you next week.